All right, what's up, people? This is going to be another by request video. And actually, I think this one is one of the best ones I've ever gotten. Well, sort of. And this dude, shout out to Happy Clam Guy. Now, I don't know if he enjoys eating those mussels or what. But this guy, longtime subscriber, longtime commenter on my channel, and he's exactly the type of guy that I like hearing from. It's that type, and there's a few others. Like there's a guy named Storm Shadow, and there's some other ones I can throw out there, but my short-term memory's on lease right now. So, but these are the type of people I like hearing from, because half the time they tell me to go fuck myself, and the other half of the time they're like, okay, well, what do you think about this? And I'm like, you know what? That's cool as fuck. It tells me these people are real people. They're not just like eating, all the shit on the plate that I shit down on the plate and then say, hey, eat this. They're like, man, fuck that. That's shit. I ain't gonna eat that motherfucking shit. So yes, shout out to Happy Glam Guy, Storm Shadow, and all of the people that watch my channel, comment on my videos, and tell me to go fuck myself sometimes, and other times you're cool. So now this gets to the heart of one of the pillars of my personal philosophy, which is Pythagoreanism, or basically numerical ontology, or the idea that everything reduces to number, which I do hold to, by the way. So this was a very good question. And basically what it boils down to is that at the heart of number theory, or more properly set theory, because that's the way it's constructed, in modern academia, even though I kind of disagree with that, and I'll get to that in a second, is that there are certain foundational paradoxes of set theory. They're well enumerated, and we kind of know that they come from one of, I think, three places. The most important one of these is going to be the infinite, and I'll get back to that in a second. The second is going to be, well, see, that's not exactly the middle finger, but that's another one of those fingers. The second is going to be definitional. So when we start defining terms a certain kind of way, we're going to notice, and this is where Russell's paradox comes in, the set of all sets, they're not members of themselves. Is X a member of itself? You're left with a paradox. That's a definitional paradox. It doesn't really have to do with infinity, even though the set of all sets, which are not members of themselves, that could be finite or infinite. It doesn't really matter. And then I think the third set of paradoxes, if I could, I don't know, this might not be well defined, but is the concept that when we apply mathematics to the world, when we do it, when we human beings do it, we're doing it from a certain perspective. So for example, take the concept of negative numbers. What is a negative number? Now, if I say there's one Coke can on this table, you have an idea of what one Coke can means, right? But if I say negative one Coke cans on this table, you would have no idea what that means without the one Coke can being there. And then you add the negative one, and then, but you never see the negative one. What is the negative one? Is the negative one me grabbing it? You see what I'm saying? So even though we have a concept of what certain things mean fundamentally, we really don't have a concept. Is it me doing it, or is there a ghost in here doing it? When I go from 1 minus 1 to 0, right? There's 0 Coke cans on the table. What is the mechanism for the negative 1? Does it have to be a hand grabbing it and taking it? So that's the third class. Now I'm going to kind of just brush all these under the rug by saying that when I say that I'm a Pythagorean, what I mean by that is I do believe that a concept loosely called enumeration, which is relative measure. So like, for example, if I say inches, and then I say 4 inches, meaning the measurement top to bottom, you understand what 4 inches is based on the concept of an inch, which would be like that, right? But other than that, that's only one possible measure of that can. Now again, that's going to be marked by pi. That's going to be marked by pi. And pi is one of those numbers that never changes across all dimensionalities. You know, these are what I call the marks of divinity. But that's a whole nother fucking thing. What I'm trying to say is that we only have a very us-biased understanding of what certain mathematical operators even mean within this world. So when I say enumeration, what I'm basically talking about is, you know that part in the Matrix where the shit's coming down, like the code, and then all of a sudden it blurs in and blurs out and you're in the fucking Matrix? That's what I'm fucking talking about. I'm talking about encoding. I'm not necessarily talking about the rules between, you know, either different, what we might call numbers, because what does that mean? We can't even measure it. It's immeasurable and it's a finite quantity. See, that points to where I'm coming from with my Pythagorean understanding. Even though Pythagoras was notorious for hating even irrational numbers, like the square root of 2, which as far as I know is not transcendent. But what that just means is it's not any possible coefficients of an algebraic equation or some shit like that. Who the fuck cares? These are all basically human derived categories, which gets to the paradoxes of the infinite. Because I don't believe, you could tell I just smoked a couple bowls because I'm huffing and puffing in this motherfucking video. But I had to make it while I was here in the place. So, the fuck was I even fucking saying? See? Now you got me on a loss. I do not believe that an actual infinite is possible. I believe that a possible infinite is actual, which gets back to my concept of the zero and the sum, which is basically nirvana, samsara. It gets back into my Buddhism as well. All these terms all translate into each other. So I don't believe that there is an actual existent set that is infinite. I believe that every set has to be measurable, meaning it has to be demarcated. I don't buy into the transfinite analysis. I can link you to videos I've already made on that. The one where I destroy the diagonal argument. You know, the one where I forget, there was another one where I went through all the alephs and just fucking demolished them. I don't know. I can't even find that one anymore because I wanted to go back and look at it, but I couldn't even find it. But basically, just go read, just go pick up ineffable cardinal and just ineffable like the Pope. You know, can't make a mistake. Ineffable cardinal. Just type that into your little search engine, Google, and pull up what it says, and you'll see why I have a problem with a lot of higher mathematics that's going on these days. I just don't think anything's relatable to the real. I think, you know, if we want to talk about like, okay, Superman can fly, but how can he fly? Now, normally when you hear this, and when they tell you in the comics is, they say, well, because he's from Krypton that had a stronger gravity, that he has a more power over that gravity. Well, that would just mean he could jump, and that was the original power. Superman originally couldn't fly. But that was the original power, is he could just jump really high. But if you want to make him fly, he has to actually create a field within his own body that is anti-grav. So who'd have to do that? So then you have to have some way of generating that field. So when you get into these higher level transfinite mass, you start seeing that kind of shit where they're basically creating superpowers. They're basically like, well, my guy can jump over a building, but if there's 3 buildings, he can jump over all 3 and then he saves extra time. But that's a special power. So that makes the set this much higher than that set, which is, none of this is correlated to the real world. The real world, as large as it is coded by a finite machine. That finite machine, what we would call the universe, is basically a part of a potential infinity. But each one of those actualizations has to be finite. Because in The Christians and the theists, they're very quick to point this out. Once you admit to an actualized infinity, you stop making sense. You can't talk about X is before Y is before Z, because if it's an infinite chain, there is no way to establish a before and after. And I don't think that Einstein's theories have anything to do with that when we talk about relativity, so I wouldn't even consider that as a possibility. It's not even the same, just assuming that might be a response. But so yeah, the idea is basically that everything that we experience within our reality, within our world, within our universe, is finite measure versus finite measure. Meters per second. You get what I'm saying? Stuff like that. When we compare those things, we always get a finite measure, which is why we always see the world as finite. We'll never see it as infinite. We don't have the quote unquote God's eye view. We just don't have that. Is there such a thing? I don't think so, but I don't know. Who the fuck knows? You know what I mean? So as far as these paradoxes go, I think what it boils down to really is a misused application of certain, empirical principles. For example, that I can measure X in terms of Y. That gives me a ratio. 3X to 4Y. So 3X equals 4Y. That's an abstraction. Mathematics is a simple abstraction. The more complicated you make it, like I said, when you start talking about negatives, and then you start talking about the square roots of negatives, and then you start talking about the fact that perhaps, 4 dimensions is not enough. Maybe we need 8. You know what I mean? Or what's the next one? It's not 16, is it? I think it's something else. But when we start talking about these quaternions and, higher forms of numbering than just complex numbers, hyper complex, I think there's a point at which we stop talking about reality and really we start talking about how does Superman fly? And I think, and I say that and I laugh, but I do really think it's almost that simple. Is that what creates this world that we inhabit? It is relative measure. It is Pythagorean. It is mathematical. But as to when you start talking about all these, this is what, I kicked set theory, advanced set theory, which is basically transfinite analysis, the same time I kicked superstring theory in physics, because they have the same flaw fundamentally. They're not really talking about any kind of reality that we inhabit. They're talking about so how does Spider-Man exactly stick to walls? Well, you know what? I just think that he does. I just think that Spider-Man just he does this. He put his foot on the wall and it sticks. And then he can walk up the fucking wall onto the ceiling. Then he's upside down. I don't know, does he feel gravity the same way I do? Does the blood go to his head? Does he get dizzy? I don't fucking know. But you could write that either way if you wanted to in the myth, in the story, in the comic book. So, Happy Clam God, to answer your question, long and short of the whole thing is basically you have to be very careful whether you're talking enumeration or the fact that the world is relative measure. And it doesn't have to be a single unit. I happen to make an argument that the single unit is what's the, paradoxical self. But we could get into that. But that other measures are just I don't know. How many grams of kryptonite would it take to kill Superman? Because, look, I don't know. You tell me, bro. But anyway, I hope that helped. I know I always got to leave room for future fucking videos. But, hey, shout out to you guys, man. My audience. The people that pay attention, the people that give me shit. That's what it's all about, man. Gotta love you guys.